Okay, so I bought this little camping stove. It's a petrol stove and it's a neat little case, and I believe that this is a Russian copy of an original Swedish design. So you open it up like that, and as you can see the burner is not in the right place, but open the door and all is revealed, because then what happens is the burner goes to the right position, the petrol canister gets moved out of the way. You can then take this little key out of here and put it in there, and then you can turn it on and off as required. Now when I bought this, it didn't work properly. As you can see, there's a lot of soot on it, and that's because it was burning with a very yellow flame. It was producing a lot of soot. It just wasn't working right, and I was very puzzled as to why this might be. But I went online and discovered that in this tube here there should be a wick, and I was thinking that if the wick was damaged, then what would be happening is, instead of the fuel evaporating, vaporizing and getting burned, maybe unrestricted flow would mean that liquid fuel was getting through, and that was causing my rich issue. As it happens, I undid the nut and took the pipe out and found out that let's wait for the ambulance to go by, and found out that the wick was actually missing. Further investigation showed that it was actually loose inside the petrol tank. I was able to fish it out, stuff it back in there, made sure it was nice and secure, put it all back together again, and now it seems to be working fine. So that's a brief overview of getting it to work, and now a demonstration of how it actually works. So what you've got to do is you've got to turn the fuel on, like so, and you'll see that fuel is now coming through the jet and is actually dripping down. Now the reason it's doing that is because I've literally just filled it up, but if you find that the fuel is not coming out of there, all you've got to do is hold this tank like this, and the heat from your hands is enough to push the fuel through. So what's happened is the fuel's flooded out of the jet, and it's now landed in a little cup down the bottom, and that is the preheat mechanism. So now if I was to set fire to this, come on, there she goes. By the way, you need to turn the fuel off. I forgot that bit. Yeah, so you turn the fuel tap on, you let the fuel seep out into the cup, and then turn the fuel off. You set fire to it, and then once you think that the fuel is going to burn down, that's when you turn the petrol back on, and with a bit of luck you start to have a working unit. Put my can on, and there she goes. Nice blue flame, very little soot, as it should be. You'll notice that it's quite noisy as well, but apparently that's a typical characteristic of them. It's actually on the camera, it's not showing up the flame a lot, but trust me, the flame is there, and it's really quite hot. So anyway, what am I doing here? Well, I'm going to try and make myself a cup of coffee. So I've got my pan of water here. So can you see the flame? Oh, that's probably a good view of the flame, isn't it? There we go. So it's running quite nicely. So as you can see, this is the on-off switch, on-off tap, and you can see that it's got a little chain on to make sure you definitely don't lose that. The petrol tank has a pressure relief valve. Now it is possible for the fuel tank to actually overheat and this pressure release valve to release. And what can happen is you then get a huge flame coming out of here, so you've got to be a bit careful of that. Apparently it overheats most commonly if you put a really large pan on, but what you can do to counteract against that is you can rotate this heat shield like this, like that, and that'll help protect the petrol tank from excessive heat. As you can see, I mean, you can see the level of soot that's built up. That was all done when it wasn't burning properly, wasn't working properly. And as you can see, it's working quite nicely there now. I like the fact that it's very compact. It's a very small unit, and I think it should prove most useful when I'm out and about on the motorbike, because I can simply drain the fuel from the motorbike into the tank. So I've got an endless supply of fuel. And obviously at the same time it's a very compact unit, and it's not going to take up much space. So how long will it take to make my cup of tea? Yeah, there seems to be, as you can probably tell there, the wind has picked up a bit. It's not the best in the wind. It tends to do what you see in there. So obviously in a real world environment I would have to have a little windshield around it. Although apparently it does warn you that you shouldn't overdo the wind protection too much, because again, if you enclose too much heat around the cooker, you can over pressurize your fuel tank. There is apparently an optional extra for this unit, where you can put a pump onto this valve here to actually pre-pressurize the system. But as far as I can make out, that's only really needed when you are in really like sub-zero temperatures. So how are we doing? It's burning away there. How's my water going? Oh, starting to vapour a bit. Looking good. Obviously it's not as clean and not as safe as a simple little camping gas cooker, but I quite like the fun of it. I like the fact that it's old school. Apparently this thing was originally made in Sweden. Like I said, this is as far as I know, a Russian, a Soviet Russian, probably mid-80s, 70s, 80s copy of that design. The biggest difference I can see between this one and the original is that whereas you get a spanner with this to take the jet out and do some maintenance tasks on it, it looks like on the original version the handle actually had the tool built in for doing that. And the other big difference was that it looks like it's got like a brass tank instead of this chromed steel tank. I'm probably going to have to get a little fuel canister for it, because I don't like keeping the fuel in the machine, because it seems to be a bit leaky. Whether they're all like that, I don't know. So the only thing about doing is getting one of those red fuel bottles, and then I can fill it up when I need it, and then when I finish my particular cooking and before I pack it away, I can put the fuel back into the fuel container. Right, so how long's that rain going? I don't know. Probably about 6 minutes or so. Like I say, if it had less wind, it probably would be a little bit quicker than this little demonstration here. How are we doing? Oh. Definitely think we're starting to get that. Oh, I think it might be there. Yeah, I think that might be some boiling water. There we go. Now that the flame is definitely out, I'm just going to release the pressure on the tank. There we are. And time for a cup of coffee.